Your insurance bill is about to become a foreclosure notice, and most homeowners have no idea it's coming. In 2025, 289,000 families entered the foreclosure pipeline. December was the single worst month in years. But here's what no one's connecting. The biggest driver behind this next wave isn't interest rates. It's not job losses. It's the cost of keeping your home, your insurance, your property taxes, your HOA fees. They're quietly pushing hundreds of thousands of homeowners past the breaking point. And what we're about to show you is which zip codes are next and how to know if you're in one. Let me give you the numbers first, because they're worse than most people realize. Adam just released their year-end report for 2025. Total foreclosure filings, that includes default notices, scheduled auctions, and bank repossessions, hit 367,460 properties. That's up 14% from 2024, up 3% from 2023. And if that number sounds familiar, it should. We covered it on this channel a few weeks ago. But here's the part that didn't make the headlines. Of those 367,000 filings, 289,441 were foreclosure starts. That means the process officially kicked off on those homes. These aren't properties that already went through the system. These are families sitting in limbo right now, getting letters from their lenders, trying to figure out what happens next. That's roughly 1,000 families a day. And December was brutal. Foreclosure starts jumped 46% compared to December 2024. Completed foreclosures, meaning the bank actually took the house, more than doubled from a year earlier. Banks repossessed 46,439 homes in 2025, up 27% year over year. That's not a default notice sitting in a filing cabinet. That's a family that already lost. And here's what makes this hit different. CBS profiled a woman last year, 57 years old, on disability. She'd been keeping her head above water because her son was chipping in $600 a month to help cover bills. Well, he moved out. Within a few months, she was in foreclosure. That's how razor thin the margin is for people right now. One person leaves, one expense goes up, and the whole thing falls apart. Now, everybody's blaming interest rates for this, and yeah, rates are part of it, but that's the obvious answer. The real driver, the one that's going to turn this from a bad year into a bad decade, is something most people see every single month and never think twice about. Real quick, if this kind of market intel is helping you make better decisions, hit that notification bell. We drop new housing data every week, and the viewers who catch it first get the best opportunities. The bell makes sure you see everything immediately, not days later when the market's already moved. All right, so let me show you what's actually driving this. It's not your mortgage payment that's breaking you, it's everything around it. Think about this for a second. If you locked in a fixed rate mortgage, your principal and interest payment hasn't changed. That's the whole point of a fixed rate. But your insurance? Up. Your property taxes? Up. HOA fees? Up. Utilities? You say it this time. Up. The house didn't get more expensive. Keeping the house did. And the insurance piece is where this gets scary. The average homeowner with a mortgage is now paying roughly $2,370 a year for property coverage. That's up almost 70% in just 5 years. And in states like Florida and California, it's significantly worse than that. Insurers aren't just raising prices, they're leaving entire markets. State Farm, Allstate, AAA, they've all pulled back coverage in high-risk states. And when the big carriers leave, homeowners get pushed onto state-run last resort plans that cost double and cover less. So here's the doom loop. Insurance goes up. Your total monthly housing cost becomes unaffordable. You try to sell, but your buyer faces the exact same insurance problem. So your home sits on the market. You run out of runway. You miss a payment, then 2, then 3. And now you're in the pipeline. That's what's happening in those 289,000 homes. It's not that people bought houses they couldn't afford. It's that the cost of owning the house moved out from underneath them. And here's where this gets personal, because there's one specific gap in the system, one thing almost nobody checks, that determines whether a flood or a wildfire turns into an insurance claim or a foreclosure. And it has to do with exactly where your home sits on a map. A research firm called First Street published something earlier this year that stopped us in our tracks. They found that for every 1% increase in insurance costs, the national foreclosure rate rises by roughly 1%. 1 to 1. Think about what that means when insurance is up 70% in 5 years. But it gets worse. First Street projects that climate-driven foreclosures from flooding, wildfires, wind damage could surge 380% over the next decade. By 2035, they estimate that up to 30% of all foreclosures in this country will be caused by climate-related events. Right now, that number is around 7%. We're talking about a 4 times increase. And here's the gap I mentioned, the one nobody's checking. Flood insurance is only required if your home sits inside a FEMA-designated special flood hazard area. But FEMA's maps are wildly outdated. Millions of homes that face real flood risk are technically outside those zones. And when those homes flood, the owners have no insurance. First Street looked at 29 major flood events between 2002 and 2019 and found that homes outside FEMA flood zones experienced foreclosure rates 52% higher than homes inside the zones. Why? Because inside the zones, people had insurance. Outside, they had nothing. So the people who think they're safe might actually be the most exposed. One storm, one event, and they're facing an uninsured loss with no safety net. That's not a hypothetical. That's already happening. Let me show you where this is hitting hardest, because some of these might surprise you. The top 3 states for foreclosure stats in 2025 were Texas at 37,215, Florida at 34,336, and California at 29,777. Those 3 probably don't shock anyone. But look at the metro level. New York led with 14,189 foreclosure starts. Chicago was right behind at 13,312. Houston came in at 13,009. Florida had the worst foreclosure rate in the country. 1 in every 230 housing units received a filing. 1 in 230. That means on a typical residential street in Florida, odds are someone on your block is going through this. And here's the part most people are missing. This isn't just a coastal problem. First Street projects that extreme rainfall and river flooding are going to drive foreclosure up in inland states too. We're talking about places in the Mountain West, the Great Lakes region, areas that nobody associates with climate-driven housing risk. But if you don't have flood insurance and your basement fills with 4 feet of water, it doesn't matter if you live in Miami or Missouri. Let me make this concrete. Say you bought a home in Houston in 2021. FHA loan, 3.5% down. Your mortgage payment is locked at $1,800. But since you bought, your insurance went from $1,400 a year to $2,600. Property taxes ticked up. Your total monthly housing cost quietly crossed from 32% of your income to 41%. You haven't missed a payment yet, but you've stopped saving. 1 car repair, 1 medical bill, 1 layoff, and you're in the pipeline. That's the math playing out right now across all these zip codes. That scenario I just described, it's not hypothetical for a lot of people. So let me walk you through exactly who's most at risk right now, because there's no one specific type of borrower that's in more danger than anyone is talking about. FHA borrowers, here's why. There's a tool called a partial claim. It's basically a way for your service to make missed payments and tack them onto the back of your loan so you can get current again. It's a lifeline. In 2020, about 5% of FHA borrowers had used a partial claim. By 2025, that number hit 50%. Half of all FHA borrowers have already pulled that lever. And under the new FHA loss mitigation rules, if you've already used your partial claim, that safety net may not be available to you again. Now, layer this on top. If you bought with 3.5% down, your equity is paper thin. If you used a state down payment assistance program, even thinner. If you bought in 2021 or 22 at peak prices, your home may not have appreciated enough to give you a meaningful cushion. And here's the stat that ties it all together. Roughly 94% of mortgage defaults happen after an income disruption, a job loss, a medical emergency, a divorce. It's almost never just the costs alone. It's the costs plus a life event. The costs create the pressure. The life event is the match. So if you're an FHA borrower who's already used a partial claim, you bought with minimal money down, and your total housing costs have crept up above 35 or 40% of your income, you are running on fumes, and one disruption could push you over the edge. If any of that sounds like you or someone you know, Don't panic, but don't zoom past this next part either, because there are 3 things you can do right now this week to figure out where you actually stand. And the first one takes about 30 seconds. Go to firststreet.org, type in your address, it's free. It'll show you your flood risk, fire risk, wind risk, and heat risk. And it goes way beyond what FEMA's outdated maps tell you. If your home shows elevated flood risk, and you don't carry separate flood insurance, that's the gap I was talking about earlier. That's the difference between an insurance claim and a foreclosure. This takes 30 seconds, and it might be the most important 30 seconds you spend this month. Step 2, do the honest math. Pull out a calculator and add up your actual total monthly housing cost. Not just your mortgage plus insurance, plus property tax, plus HOA, plus utilities, plus average maintenance. If that number has crossed 35 to 40% of your gross monthly income, you're in what lenders call the stress zone. That's the range where one disruption, one unexpected expense can start a chain reaction. Most people have never actually done this math. They know their mortgage payment. They don't know their total. You can't fix what you haven't measured. And step 3, this is the one that could actually save your home. Know your equity position and know your options before you ever miss a payment. This is the step most people get wrong. They wait. They think they'll catch up next month. They don't call their servicer because they're embarrassed or they think it won't make a difference. But here's the reality. Once you're 90 days late, your options shrink dramatically. If you're underwater or close to it, call your loan servicer now and ask about loss mitigation. Not after you've missed 3 payments. Now. And if you're an FHA borrower specifically, find out whether you've already used your partial claim. Because if you have, you need to know that before you're in trouble, not after. The people who lose their homes aren't usually the ones who couldn't be helped. They're the ones who waited too long to ask. And if you want to make sure you never miss an update like this, hit the notification bell right now. We put out new housing data every week. And in this market, the difference between catching it on day 1 and seeing it 3 days later can be the difference between getting ahead of a problem and getting caught in one. Because here's the bottom line. This foreclosure wave isn't just about interest rates. It's about insurance, climate risk, and rising costs quietly pushing families past the edge. And it's accelerating. If this opened your eyes to something you weren't seeing before, send it to someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.